So the first topic today is how can I exit a sketch in SOLIDWORKS, and this sounds like a pretty easy support topic. I'm sure everybody knows how to get out of a sketch in SOLIDWORKS, but I'm going to go over actually 11 ways that we can exit a sketch in SOLIDWORKS, and we're going to look at that in regards to maybe different configuration things we can do in SOLIDWORKS, or just maybe some things that you guys didn't know, and it's going to lead us to other topics when we're actually working within SOLIDWORKS. So I'm going to go over to my screen. Wow, that's a fun pink color. Just one second, guys. There we go. So I'm going to go over to my screen, and I have this sketch here, and I'm in here editing the sketch. And so the first thing that a lot of people know on how to exit a sketch is, of course, just this exit sketch button. So the button's up here. This is your command manager. Some people use toolbars instead, but basically these are buttons that allow you to do certain commands, and they're separated out. So maybe you're working with surfaces, sheet metal, weldments. But in the terms of exiting a sketch, there's just this exit sketch button. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that you can actually configure the command manager so you can turn it on and off. So I've seen people run into an issue where their command manager gets turned off, and they don't know how to exit the sketch from there because that button's not there anymore. So what we do is we right-click up in the blank space up here, and we check on the command manager, and that allows that command manager to turn back on and us to find our exit sketch button. Also, sometimes the tabs can get turned off. So I'm looking for my exit sketch button, and I notice that my whole sketch tab is actually missing. I don't have a sketch tab available for me, so I can't exit the sketch using this exit sketch button. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to right-click on any of the tabs, and I notice I have all of these tabs that I can pick from, and I can actually pick different ones going through here. These will sometimes accidentally get turned off. They should get turned on when certain add-ins are turned on too. The sketch feature normally is on automatically. Sometimes it gets accidentally turned off, so that's just how you can turn it back on. Another thing that we can do from this right-click on a tab is we can customize the command manager. So notice that now every possible tab that I have is up here and available for me to turn on or off. But something else that's pretty cool is I can go into my commands, and I can actually drag different commands up into my tab. So I'm looking at my sketch tab. It has most of what I want up here already, but maybe, for instance, think of one that I don't get very often. Maybe I use the dissolve entities a lot. Maybe I work with sketch text like this is, and I have to dissolve the entities a lot because I have to edit it. So what I can do is I can drag it, and I can actually put it in different locations on the sketch tab, and I can hit OK. And now that button is there all the time, so I can always have it right there for me to dissolve the entities. But to go back to our original topic, the first way to exit a sketch is we just exit a sketch from there. All right, let's go to our second way. So I'm working in a sketch. The second way to exit it is this command corner. So I can go over to the right, and I can exit the sketch from this command corner. Sometimes I've seen people run into the issue where this command corner isn't there, and that's actually a setting within SOLIDWORKS. So what we're going to go to our settings. We're going to go either to Tools and Options, or just hit this little gear button up here to get into our options. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into our General, and we're going to enable the confirmation corner. Now mine was already on, so let's turn it off and see what that looks like. So now when I'm looking here, I notice I don't have that button over in my top right-hand corner. I can't exit from there. So if you ever run into this issue and you don't have that confirmation corner and you really want to be able to use that confirmation corner, you can always go up, hit your settings, go into System Options, General, and enable your confirmation corner, and that will turn your confirmation corner on, and I can exit the sketch from there. All right, another way that's pretty nice to enter a sketch. I see a lot of people do this, especially when you're going to be using this naturally to create a model. So I've just been working with the sketch and haven't been doing anything with it yet. But another thing I can do if I wanted to create this and turn it into a model is I can actually go into my features, hit extrude boss base, or cut if I had it, and I can actually turn this straight into an extrude from that sketch. So I had the sketch and I turned it into an extrude. And then you'll notice that the sketch gets thrown under the boss extrude because it's now part of that. A reverse way to do that, if I wanted to do a boss extrude and I don't have a sketch created, I can go in and create a new sketch. So I'm just going to do a circle here. I create a circle. I create a circle here because I started off being in a feature. Now when I hit exit sketch, it automatically jumps into that feature. So that's kind of the reverse of that. When I exit out of the sketch, or if I went into the feature, it automatically goes in that boss extrude feature. I'm just going to exit. And a little extra thing about the command corner, we notice we have the exit sketch and the red X button. So I'm going to talk a little bit what that red X button does. What this does is it allows us to discard the sketch and not save any changes. So I'm going to completely get rid of the sketch. Any changes I've made since I last edited it will be removed. So that's what the red X versus the exit sketch button does. I'm going to discard changes and exit. And I'm just going to delete my sketch too because I don't want that anymore. All right, let's go back into that sketch and look at another way. All right, so we've done 3 ways to exit a sketch. Number 3.5, or number 4, sorry, is to exit a sketch using a double click. And I really got to thank Peer for this. He reminded me that this was another way to exit a sketch. So you can exit a sketch using a double click. So I should be able to do that, but I'm double clicking and I notice that that's not working. The reason for this is part of the Instant 2D, Instant 3D feature pack that only works if you have Instant 3D turned on. So I'm going to turn on Instant 3D to show you what it does, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what those do. So now I have Instant 3D turned on, and when I double click, it exits that sketch right there. So I'm going to go in and try that again. Exit sketch, I'm done working, and because Instant 3D is turned on, it's exiting the sketch right away. Now I see this in tech support. I've actually seen this in 2 different ways. Or we could see this in 2 different ways. One, why am I accidentally exiting my sketch? So I've heard a lot of people run into this, especially teaching essentials. People will go through, they'll be drawing, and then they'll accidentally double click and it will pull them out of the sketch. Why do I keep accidentally getting exited out of the sketch? Well, it's because Instant 3D is probably turned on, and that's causing you to exit the sketch there. So what does Instant 3D and Instant 2D do? So Instant 2D, notice, is over in our command manager right here, and this enables us to drag the sketch dimensions, automatically modify the sketches. Something else that it does, so let's say I had a dimension here. I'm not going to change that, so it's 0.9. Unless I perfectly click on the dimension there, I will pull up this other box in order to edit it. So it's just like a quick edit box. It doesn't have any of the other dimensions. I can also grab these 2 little blue dots and dynamically expand and shrink my sketch dimensions, which is why a lot of times I suggest that we turn Instant 2D off so we don't accidentally pull those sketches. Instant 3D does something similar. So I'm going to turn this into a boss extrude again using that hint I just saw before, and I'm going to hit green check. So something cool that Instant 3D does is when I'm working here, I can actually, if I click on the surface, notice I get this little arrow. I can now drag the straight from support to be bigger or smaller using Instant 3D. And notice this dimension is dynamically changing. So that's what Instant 2D and Instant 3D do. They allow us to do this. Like I said, a lot of times I just suggest turning it off so you don't accidentally grab it. But if that's something you guys tend to use a lot, and you've noticed that maybe some of those features aren't available or anything like that, that's what's going on, and that's how you turn Instant 2D and Instant 3D back on. So I'm going to delete this again so we can be back in our sketch. All right, the number 5 is going to be a rebuild. So there are a few ways that we can rebuild. So I'm going to show you guys some of the different ways we can exit a sketch, and then I'm going to talk about the different rebuilds. So I could just hit Control Q, and that's going to pull me out of a sketch. So Control Q is a rebuild. But I also know there's a rebuild button here, but that says that its rebuild is Control B. So what's the difference between a Control B and a Control Q? So we only have one feature in our tree, so it really doesn't make a big difference here with Control B and Control Q. But the main difference is this rebuilds any features that it sees have changed. So it says, oh, this sketch changed, you should rebuild it, I'll just rebuild that sketch. That Control Q goes through your entire tree and rebuilds everything. So this Control Q is going to take significantly longer on larger parts than a Control B would. Some other things we have are Control Shift Q and Control Shift B. I don't have any configurations, but that will rebuild all of your configurations. So if I do Control Shift Q, it will rebuild all of my configurations within SOLIDWORKS. Oh wait, just Shift. There we go. All right. The next thing is the shortcut key. So this is actually one of the features I don't use a lot, but if you hit F, on when you're just working in SOLIDWORKS, I hit F, notice that I get a list of all these shortcuts that just pop up, one of which is Exit Sketch, and it's ready for me to just go in and exit the sketch. So this is my S key, and then depending on what I'm working in, I get different keys depending on what type of interface I'm working in. So am I in a sketch, am I in assembly, am I in exited a sketch ready to make a feature? What's nice about the shortcut key is you can actually customize it. So I'm going to hit my drop down next to options and go customize. And I can go to my shortcut bar. So I'm in my sketch shortcut bar now, but there are other shortcut bars here. Like I said, they're in different situations. I get different shortcut bars. So I can exit my sketch, I can do my drawing, I can do my part, or I can do my assembly. But I can actually reconfigure the shortcut bar. So maybe I want it to be smaller like this. And maybe I also want, when I'm working in a sketch, a lot of times I need to directly turn it into a boss space. So I'm going to throw that onto my sketch shortcut bar, hit OK. And now, whenever I hit my S key, I can directly turn it into a boss space from that shortcut bar. So this is actually combining two into one. I can exit using my exit sketch, or I can exit using that right here. The other thing we have, and it's similar to the shortcut bars, are right-click menus. So if you just right-click anywhere in the blank space, you have a menu that pops up here. One of the options there is to exit the sketch. What you'll notice is, let's right-click, edit the sketch. This kind of copies the feature from our shortcut bar, and we can customize this bottom menu if we need to, because we can also right-click, go into Sketch Tools, and we have a lot of other sketch options available here. So always remember that you just have your right-click menu available, and you can do a lot of things directly from that right-click menu, so you don't necessarily have to go back up to the top. So rather than maybe having to go up and search for the circle command, I can just go right here and start creating a circle. All right, number 8 is going to be the Insert and Edit menu. So similar to the shortcut menu, we also have menus up here with drop downs that we can pull through. So if we go to our Insert, notice that Exit Sketch is just sitting right there under our Insert menu. The other option we have, I talked about that red X over here. So insert will exit the sketch and it will save our changes. We also have our edit menu that has that exit sketch without saving changes. So they are in two different menus, which I actually find nice because it means I'm not accidentally going to click the wrong one. But it allows me to exit the sketch without saving changes. So if you're looking for just exiting a sketch normally, it's an insert. If you're looking to exit it without saving the changes, it's an edit. And we have a lot of other things that we can do with our sketches directly from these menus. So in my insert menu, I can do my boss, my cut, I can do all of those options directly from here. And I also have a few other things, like I can put in tables if I need to. I can go to my tools menu, and this has a lot of sketch tools in it. So for sketch entities, every type of sketch entity that I really would want to have the option is sitting right there. For sketch tools, tools that I normally use with sketch, a little known one is this check sketch for feature that I really like this menu, because what it does is it checks the sketch. I can click on it and say, hey, if I wanted to use a boss extrude on this, would this work or would it throw errors? And I know it already is going to work because I've done a boss extrude with this before, but I hit check and it says, hey, there are no problems found. There are 28 closed contours, so there are probably 28 letters / dashes, including the little dot on top of the I, and no open contours. So it says, yes, you would be able to create a boss extrude from this sketch. So that's a really useful thing in that command. The other option, and this is something I use a lot, and I've set mine to the defaults for right now, is our mouse gestures. So mouse gestures are acquired by holding down your right click button, and when you start to scroll, you get some options you can do directly from the sketch. But if I notice, hey, exit sketch isn't here, but I would like it to be, that would be a nice way to be able to exit the sketch. So I'm going to go up to my options. I'm going to go to customize. I'm going to go to mouse gestures. And I notice I have, similar to my shortcut bar, I get custom mouse gestures per what I'm working on in SOLIDWORKS. And notice here on sketch, these are the 4 they chose by default. And what I can do is I can take more gestures and start throwing them in there. But I don't like all these. I don't use the sketch fillet a lot. I actually don't like that command. So I'm going to go in. I could either do exit sketch without saving, or I can do my sketch button, put that over my fillet, hit OK. And now when I drag down, I'll show you that again. I know that went really fast. So now when I hold down my right button and drag down, I have that exit sketch command. Oh, it was already up there. Sorry about that, guys. So now all I have to remember is that I just drag down to the right and it will exit my sketch. The way I use this most of the time, and if any of you guys have taken a class with me, you'll know this, I really like being able to just go up and start dimensioning. That's my main way that I get to my dimension tool, and in and out of my dimension tool. So when I'm done dimensioning, I just drag up rather than going all the way up to the screen and exiting out from there. Number 10. So the number 10 way that we can exit a sketch is a keyboard shortcut. So I already know that I have the S toolbar where I can have shortcuts there automatically, but I can also create my custom keyboard shortcuts to exit the sketch. And there's not one automatically for exiting sketch right now. There's for like line and filters, stuff like that. FYI, if you ever accidentally get your filters in a lot, you can remove this E filter. I see that trip up a lot of people. They'll accidentally get into the filter command. But what it also allows us to do is, let's say I want to, for my sketch, turn that into, I have to think of a shortcut that's not used. Control S, no, that's obviously used. Shift S, yeah, so I'm going to do Shift S, hit OK. Then when I hit Shift S, it should open up the sketch command. Something else I can do there, oops, I hit general options, not that. Customize keywords, shortcuts. Is I can look for exit sketch without saving changes. And I can add one there too, and this is also very important to remember the difference between exit sketch and exit sketch without saving. So if you do make a shortcut there, just make sure you are fully aware that that's the one that won't save any changes when you're exiting the sketch. And then the last one, and it's kind of silly to use it with exit sketch because you have all of these options, but I do want to show you the search bar. So I can search for exit, and I'll get exit sketch without saving, or I can search for sketch, and I get my exit sketch button, and I can exit the sketch straight from here. But something really nice about the search bar, SKET, if for some reason I wanted this on a different page, so maybe I use surfaces a lot and I'm working with sketches in there, and I just want the exit sketch button to be on my surfaces as well, I can drag it from there over to my exit sketch button. Something else I can do, if you hit this eyeball, it will actually navigate you to the pane, so I'm not the one doing this, and it will point out where that exit sketch button is. So let's try it on a different command, just because exit sketch is so easy to find. Let's say I don't know where to find a sketch picture. I hit my eyeball. This is SOLIDWORKS taking over for me. I'm not touching the mouse. It goes to Sketch Tools, and it tells me, hey, sketch picture is down here at the bottom. So it actually opens up the menu and tells me where to find it. It's a nice learning thing for me because I can then learn where the command is. I'm just not having to search for it all the time. And that was 11 ways to exit a sketch in SOLIDWORKS. So that's 11 ways that we can exit a sketch and just 11 ways of configuring SOLIDWORKS that you guys might not have known about before. Once again, if you guys have any questions, be sure to throw them into the chat. Hope you guys liked this little segment. And I'm going to pass it over to Peer, who's going to talk about your SQL installations.
All right. Thank you, Heather. That's some pretty cool stuff. I can't believe there's that many ways to exit a sketch, but they really pack
like
in
redundancy.
a number of ways. Yeah, a number of ways to do it. So cool. Well, yeah. So basically, I'm not going to be talking too much about the actual install process, but there's some pitfalls that we might encounter after we've installed that could happen, especially when we start mixing the products together. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about in relation to SQL Server installs for electrical, PDM Standard, or PDM Professional, and potentially any combination of those. So let's see, here we go. So in short, SQL Server is kind of like the chassis, or perhaps the engine might be another alternative analogy of the overall product that we're working with. And it basically gives us the horsepower, it stores the data, it does the work for the applications. So just a little bit of background behind that. So it's important that we have it installed. It comes from Microsoft, and it's kind of a bear of its own. But generally, Microsoft is really good about making sure that you will have to meet its prerequisites before you can go ahead and do the install. Okay. But in particular, what I want to talk about is connecting to the SQL Server and what could potentially happen for you to prevent you from connecting. So many of us are familiar with client-server kind of applications. A client will attempt to communicate or connect to a server application via some port. So the client will pick a random port on its sort of port selection list, and then generally connect to a particular port on the server side of things. And then a firewall is there as a security feature to block access to certain ports that are not in use. So if you think about ports, kind of like mailboxes, each mailbox is a port that we could have a program listening to, and by default, most of them are locked. So, we try to send a letter in, and it's just can't open the box, we can't get one in, but we'll open up certain ports as needed for access for a program to listen to. So it's key that we unlock the right mailboxes and we listen to the right mailboxes for that to work out for us. In addition, you can have multiple installs of SQL Server on the same machine. So for example, if I install PDM Standard and then Electrical next to each other, they'll probably have their own instances. And so, kind of throw the clones in here, but yeah, they're instances. So what happens is when you install SQL Server, whether you're going to do what's called a default instance where you don't give it a specific name, it takes on the default name of MS SQL Server, it's going to select a static port of 1433 and it's going to listen to that particular port, that particular mailbox. However, if you make a named instance and give it some other name, any name at all, it will go with a dynamic port. Now that's going to be a port somewhere between 1 and 65,535, minus a few exceptions that are reserved for certain things. But if you imagine that if you've got a firewall that you've opened up some port on and your SQL Server is doing a dynamic port instance, you've got a pretty low chance of getting the right port. And that dynamic port changes every time you restart that service. So it's important to settle on a static port and then configure your firewall for that to work. That way the client will be able to connect to the server. So when installing Electrical, by default, it will pick TW SQL Express, which is a named instance, so that's a dynamic port. So you will likely want to look at setting that to a static port. And PDM Standard, by default, will pick SWPDM, also a named instance, also a dynamic. And they do explicitly say in the install process that we should set that to be a static port. But the install wizard makes it dynamic. That's just how the SQL Server install goes, just what Microsoft has shipped for us. Now, when installing PDM Professional, it's actually a manual install of SQL Server, so it depends on whatever you pick or whatever the VAR has picked. So we'll go into how to change that over. But before we do that, another potential problem is that we might have two instances listening to the same port, and that can also be a problem. So you might remember the many different cartoons of Snoopy in the mailbox and Charlie Brown going to check the mail, and the mail's gone and Snoopy's there instead. Well, he didn't get the message. So likewise, your server is not getting the message, most likely, if there's two different applications listening to the same port. I mean, you've got three different situations. The wrong one always gets their message. The right one sometimes gets your message, or the right one always gets your message, and that's, 2/3 chance of failure every time. So we always want to make sure we're using unique ports. So the way to do that is on the server, wherever SQL Server is installed, we run the configuration manager, and sometimes it's not in the start menu. And if that's the case, we can pull up the Windows Run dialog by pressing the Windows key and the R key, going to Start and typing out Run. You might even be able to just type out this Run command on the right-hand side here in the Start menu, and it'll probably find what you're looking for. But the deal is we run that, and then we go through and reconfigure it to be a static port. So in my case, I have a install of 3 different installs. I've got MS SQL Server, a default install, SWPDM, and then a SQL Server 2017. So they're all separate instances. So you select the one you want on the left. On the right, you pick TCP/IP. Go to the IP addresses tab, go all the way to the bottom, and blank out the dynamic port section, and then fill out the static port section. And then hit OK, and restart your SQL Server service. And that's it. Now you've got a static port, and as long as your firewall is configured to allow that port through, you'll be able to connect. So another thing, there is a connectivity test tool, which is really handy whether you're testing for solid network licensing, PDM, electrical, even some entirely different application. You could technically use this application. But I've had a few situations where I've encountered where the tests come up good, and yet we still cannot connect. And I wanted to go into why that could be. It doesn't happen a lot, but it could happen, and it might be a little bit baffling as to what's going on, because you might get error messages saying the server cannot connect or the server could not receive data. And what's happening, or might be happening in those cases, has to do with packet size, sort of a background network thing. There's a term called maximum transmission unit, which basically is a network configuration that for your network devices, like routers and switches, which stand between the clients and the servers, that allow packets of certain sizes. I found that for PDM to work correctly, and I suspect electrical to work correctly, it has to allow packets of 1,500 bytes. And if you have some device that's configured for some number less than that, you might have no communication, you might have intermittent communication. In most cases I've seen that it was a mix of both. So the way I found this out during troubleshooting is I'll run a Windows ping command with a particular parameter -L for 1,500, and I'll just dial that number back until it starts working again, like my pings weren't working until I got there. So just a little extra tidbit, but the main focus was about configuring ports with SQL Server. So anyhow, thanks for listening. Any questions? Or we can move on, of course. I'll pass the ball back to you then, Heather. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Peer. All right. All right, so you guys should be able to see this, and just bear with me for a second while I pull the tabs over so they're not in the way. All right. So the last thing that we're going to cover today is how can I update my toolbox in PDM. So especially recently, we've been getting a lot of questions and support that basically have to do with people are getting updated to SOLIDWORKS 2018 or 19, and they're getting this message that the whole wizard is out of date, and how do we update this? Oh, by the way, our toolbox is handled by PDM, so that adds a little bit of a ripple into how to update your toolbox. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover two ways that we can update it. We have a automatic way and a manual way. So there's an automatic way to update it using SOLIDWORKS Repair, and then there's a more manual way where we have to change some keys and go in and go into a manual program and just have it go through. It can sometimes be a little bit more finicky. It needs to completely be run as admin, things like that. But this automatic way is done using a repair, but with PDM, there's an added ripple of us needing to check out some files before we go through and do that. So I'm going to cover the automatic method first, and really there are 3 steps. So we check a location in the registry, we check out specific files, and then we run a repair, and after that, it should update it, and then some ending steps, which I'll talk about post-upgrade. So to start off with, let's just take a look at what's going on. So I'm loading my SOLIDWORKS toolbox, and I get this error that says, hey, you're working in 2019 here. Your expected toolbox version is 19, but you have a 2018 toolbox. So I say, oh no, I need to fix that. So I'm going to go ahead and close SOLIDWORKS, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my registry editor. I'm just going to double check to make sure that my installation thinks my toolbox location is in the right spot. So I go to this H key, current user, software, SOLIDWORKS, 2019 general, and I'm going to search for the toolbox data location key. And this just tells me where my install thinks the toolbox is. If for some reason you look at that and it's not the toolbox located in your vault, just go ahead and change that key to your vault location, so the toolbox located in my vault right here, so that when we go into the installation manager to run a repair, that it will be pointing to that correct location. So I'm making sure I'm logged in as admin, so I need to be logged in as the admin to do this. In reality, it's anybody who has permissions to edit the file types that are in the toolbox location, so they need to have permissions that they can check out those files and check them back in and make edits. I always like to run this as admin just because sometimes toolbox have unique workflow names or anything like that, and it's just easier to run it as the admin to make sure everything happens. And in all honesty, the only people who should be going in and upgrading your entire toolbox, so messing with some of these files, are probably your admin, although some users do have the ability to add files to toolbox, and that's in a completely separate topic of how to configure your toolbox to run in PDM. But right now we're just talking about upgrading it. So I'm going to check out a few files. If you guys have tried to do this following the admin guide, I know it just tells you to check out one file. There are a few other files that you want to check out. Some of these are just logs, so it's not going to error out if you don't check them out. I like to check out all of the files because A, then my logs are properly updated. So I actually get in that toolbox version, I get that log updated and it's not just putting in a new file. And it just, I've seen less errors when doing it this way than when just checking out the single file. And that single file that they want you to always check out no matter what you're doing, you have to check out this SW browser file. If you do not check out this SW browser file with a user who can check out the file, your toolbox will not upgrade. So this is a file that absolutely needs to be checked out if you're planning on upgrading your toolbox version. After that, there's one more file I like to check out, and it's in the browser, and it's this toolbox files index, and I like to check that out as well. So I have all of these files checked out as admin, so now I'm ready to go through and start updating my toolbox. And once again, just double checking, going back into that Lang English, and making sure that my SW browser file is checked out. That is the most important file here. So now I can go into my my control panel, pardon me, and I can do a rebuild of SOLIDWORKS. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to go to Programs and Features. I'm going to navigate down to my SOLIDWORKS 2019 installation, and I'm going to change and run a repair of SOLIDWORKS. And so I'm going to run a repair. I had to blank out some because you've got the security protocol and everything that popped up. So I go to run a repair, I select the option to run a repair, and I'm unchecking everything but SOLIDWORKS. I just need to repair my SOLIDWORKS installation. The reason I'm doing this is it will just be so much faster if I'm just repairing SOLIDWORKS. And then I hit the repair button, it starts initializing, and it's going to go through that whole repair process. So it's going to start configuring the toolbox, and it goes through this big long process. I'm not going to make you guys sit through my whole SOLIDWORKS repair. So the next thing that happens is it says, hey, the repair is complete. I accidentally left the box to show me what's new because even though I've done this a million times, I forget that box sometimes. So my what's new document comes up. But the what's new document isn't bad to go through if you just installed 2019. Have a look through that guide. There may be some new features that you didn't know about. So it's never a bad idea, at least just to read the headings in the what's new document. So now we're going to go through here. I noticed that all of these files that I had checked out, notice they've been modified today. So if you notice, I took this video this morning at 8:45. But these files have been updated today, which means some changes have been made to them. So it's a good thing I checked them out. So I go in, I notice they've all had changes made to them, checked at the Lang English one, was edited as well. It put in an old file just so I have an old copy of my toolbox database in case I need to go back into 2018. And I have my new one that's currently checked out. So now what I can do is I go to my whole toolbox folder, and it's called Automatic Toolbox. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to check in all of those files. I'm just going to check in the whole folder because that's all I have checked out. Notice they're all getting a version 2 made. I've checked them in, so now I can go in and open up SOLIDWORKS. And I'm going to make sure I can use my toolbox. So I go in. Let's test out our toolbox now. Loading toolbox library, and it works. So it's working in 2019. I always like to just test it out. I like to open up an assembly and see that I can create a new assembly. So I open up an assembly template. Give it a second, it was thinking. So I've got the assembly open. It's going to take a second to load up all the add-ins and everything. I close out of there. I close out of that, and I just try and drag the toolbox part into it. So I'm going to use my hex head. I drag it in. I drop it. Yep, it's working. I can confirm that my toolbox has been updated. Now the final step that I want all of your users to complete when they're doing this with their toolbox is I want them all to go in. So I was in my Rocket demo vault. So they're all going to need to go into their, whatever your vault name is. And they're going to want to right click on the toolbox and do a get latest version. So they're going to do that before your users log into SOLIDWORKS. This will just make sure they have that new updated toolbox that you just created. So I do a get latest version. PDM is going to think for a little bit. It is a lot of files for it to think through. There's a lot of files in a toolbox. And I see that I already have all the latest because I'm the one who checked them in. But they'll notice that there are some that aren't the latest version. They'll just do a get of those ones that they don't have. And then they'll be able to open up SOLIDWORKS and use the new toolbox. So that's the way we do it if it is automatic. What if we want to update the toolbox manually? So to update the toolbox manually, there are a few more steps we have to do. First thing I've noticed in situations where we have to update manually, we almost always have to change that registry key. So I have another toolbox called Manual Toolbox. And this is a toolbox that is also, if I look at my version, it's a 2018 toolbox. So I'm going to have to update this toolbox. So I'm going to copy this file location. And like I said, the first thing I always notice is I almost always have to update this key. So that was in general, H key, current user, software, SOLIDWORKS, SOLIDWORKS 2019, or whichever version you're using, general, and then look for the key called toolbox data location. And I'm going to modify that key and drop that in there to be the manual toolbox, because this is the one I'm going to be looking at now. So I've done that key. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to check out those files. So check out the same files that I was working with before. So I'm going to check them out. So it was these guys. It was this guy. And it was this guy. So I'm going to check it out. And then I'm going to navigate to a file location that's going to be put in every time I load SOLIDWORKS. So it's going to be in C, Program Files, SOLIDWORKS Corp, SOLIDWORKS, Toolbox, Data Utilities. So I'm going to go, I'm just going to open it in a new window so I can get back to that original location easier. C, Program Files, SOLIDWORKS Corp. I've labeled mine SOLIDWORKS Corp 2019. SOLIDWORKS Toolbox Data Utilities. So SOLIDWORKS Toolbox Data Utilities, and I'm going to run this update browser exe. If you have a toolbox predating 2012, I believe there are additional steps, and there's going to be a blog posted about this that's going to list out those additional steps. Then you notice here, it says, hey, which database do you want to upgrade? Because I changed that registry key, it's already pulled in the right one. You can browse to it if it's a different toolbox. I found that to be a bit finicky, though. I do like changing the registry key a little bit better. It's upgrading the database to the 2019 version. I have some advanced options if I want to put a different directory or anything. I'm just going to hit my update button. I think that just ended. 1 second. It's admin. All this is right. Update. It goes through, it does a little dialogue, and it's going to update those files. I think I got an error here. So it just throws through. It says, hey, we went from 21 to 22, and we finished the upgrade of the database. So now I can do the same thing and check in my Rocket demo. Notice all of those got a new version, just like before, where the other toolbox all got new versions. These all got recently updated. I'm going to check it in. I'm going to go to SolidWorks. I'm going to close this down. I'm going to make sure my toolbox is pointing to the right spot. So it's looking at the automatic. Let's look at the manual toolbox. Select the folder. And I'd actually be informed automatically if this didn't work. I would get an error saying that it's a out-of-date toolbox, that it's not the correct version, but that worked. But once again, I always like to run my check. So I hit OK. It asks for an elevation request because I changed that. I'm going to open up a new assembly. So I've opened up my assembly. The file open always happens. This is a setting you can change off to start the command when creating a new assembly. I can turn that off. I most of the time use it, so I don't. Go to Toolbox. I notice it's pointing to that manual toolbox. I go in here. It's able to load the toolbox library, and I'm able to bring my hex head in there. So now I know that my toolbox is indeed working. So that was how to upgrade your toolbox in two ways. We can upgrade the automatic method, so using the SOLIDWORKS repair functionality, or the manual method using that little exe, running it as admin and letting it go through and upgrade your toolbox stuff. Just a little FYI, that does take a little longer than it did on my machine. I have a kind of watered down toolbox on here.